I'm your host, Samar Shah, and with me is Ian Holloway and Bobby Walling. Bobby, Ian, welcome to the show, guys.
Yeah. Hello, hello.
Thanks for having
Absolutely.
me.
I'm glad to have you guys here. We are rounding out our discussion about the video game industry. We talked about Xbox, we talked about gaming generally, we talked about digital streaming, so now it's Nintendo's turn. And this one's going to be a little bit different than the other ones. As I think it would be apparent to everyone is that Nintendo doesn't really follow the same rules as everyone else in really anything. So this is going to be a little bit different in terms of their strategy, and it'll be a little bit different in terms of how we analyze their patent strategy as well.
Yes, indeed. Kind of a unique company.
Absolutely. So why don't we start, I guess I can set the background up here a little bit. But yeah, Nintendo, to me, there is this real tension in terms of what Nintendo potentially could be and what Nintendo is, right? It is, as of right now, it is a niche product that's beloved by many gamers, right? Like many gamers will choose either a PlayStation or an Xbox. And then in addition, they will buy a Switch, right? Certainly, those who are into more social gaming will always choose Nintendo over some of the other gaming platforms. But yeah, they managed to kind of be less performant, but still be beloved by many, and they made their ways into many households. And there is, which raises the question as to, is that the best strategy for Nintendo, right? Like, is this like, have they found something from a product market fit perspective? Like, yeah, they're certainly very profitable. They make a lot of money. They make a lot of profit on everything that they do. But, is there a sliding doors moment here where maybe they could have been PlayStation or they could have been Xbox or as big as those companies and maybe more profitable than those companies, right? Like, that's the contrast and attention that I think we should pull on a little bit throughout this episode.
Yeah, you definitely have a group that's focused on the nostalgia and family level
That's
gamers,
right.
As opposed to, and maybe you don't need those performance or the performant
That's right.
consoles to do that, according to Nintendo.
Yeah, and maybe to understand all of this, we should start from maybe day one, right? Nintendo really came out of the 1983 crash, the video game crash, right? Before Nintendo, there was Atari, there was Sega, and those companies were dominating the market. They started off as a niche businesses as well, and they became bigger than anyone ever expected them to be. And there was this kind of bubble in the video gaming industry, and it crashed, I think, 1983. Nintendo comes out of those shambles and has a new pathway forward. One of the problems with Atari and Sega systems were piracy, right? So there were tons of knockoff chips that were cartridges that were in the marketplace
Oh.
and really bad quality control, that kind of thing. Nintendo comes in and says, hey, we're going to solve all that. So they have a lockout chip, right, that they came out with in the 1980s. So each cartridge came with a lockout chip. And if you didn't have this chip, your cartridges wouldn't work on the Nintendo platform. And they really seriously reduced a lot of knockoffs in the marketplace by doing this. And these lockout chips were so serious, like they wouldn't even like have anyone else assemble them, or they wouldn't give rights to anyone to include them in their cartridges. In fact, if you wanted to be on a Nintendo system, you had to tell Nintendo to make your cartridges for you, and you had to order way in advance. You'd have to be like, hey, Nintendo, make 10,000 chips for me. And you got to pay for those 10,000 chips to Nintendo day one, right? And then Nintendo will go and produce them and then either sell them, or if you were allowed to sell them, you'd have to pay a premium and a revenue or some kind of a fee on top of it, right? And so, a lot of people say that the App Store model, Steve Jobs kind of copied from Nintendo. They took 30% of every sale. Nintendo certainly did that for every game. Not only had you had to put up money up front to make the game, money up front to manufacture, to get Nintendo to manufacture the game, and then you also had to pay 30% for Nintendo to sell your game for you. So it was a great business model. Nintendo made a lot of money that way. The market really enjoyed the quality control and all that stuff, but also made Nintendo kind of difficult to work with, and developers really didn't like some of the draconian restrictions that Nintendo put on them.
Well, Nintendo could just refuse to sell you the chips, right? If they didn't like your game, it would not
That's
end
right.
up
If
on
it
the
was
Nintendo system.
too violent, or if it just was not family friendly enough, they would just say no, and there you are. So they kind of also steered how the direction of the games as well by just saying no.
Has to feel good to be in that position in the business, I suppose. You're kind of the only game in town. You get to set all the rules coming out
Yeah,
of this crash.
It is interesting, right? Like it does take a special person. Like I think Steve Jobs is kind of famously difficult to work with. For you, like if you're an executive in industry, for you to just say F you to a bunch of your colleagues, right, outside of your industry, you gotta have some kind of special culture to support that. And Nintendo certainly had that in spades.
Never had to work with anybody like that, Bobo.
Can't can't think of anything.
Yeah. So, and Ian, actually, maybe you should take this next one. But
Yeah.
cartridges, great product and a great solution for Nintendo, right? They had the lockout chips. They made a lot of money this way. They really held their developers
hmm
to the fire of using this cartridge system. But with every opportunity comes an opportunity cost, right? So, yeah, can you walk us through what happens next?
Yeah, I think this is great because Nintendo is looking towards the future a little bit here. They hire a small company to help develop a disk drive for their next console. They see CDs as potentially the future solution to gaming. This is between the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 days. And this company developed it. They were very excited to put it forward to Nintendo, and Nintendo said no. So that company went off and became the Sony PlayStation to work directly in competition with them. So I guess you really have to be careful at who you say no to as you're going on, which is interesting because it's an opportunity that Nintendo saw. They recognized it early on. They put R&D resources into it and just passed on it because they chose to maintain that control that they got with cartridges. CD is obviously a lot cheaper to make, gives you a little bit more freedom, and you can't put a lockout necessarily on your CD. We see Nintendo make this choice, and it continues on, I think, throughout. Whenever Nintendo has an option of maintaining control over what they know works and potentially opening up to a new, broadening out their ecosystem here, they always choose control. So when online gaming comes out, they're very slow to react, and they're going to put out some sort of add-on to, I think, the GameCube or something like that, but make it fairly inaccessible. Don't have a lot of games to support it. They're not doing any sort of video streaming quickly. You'll see the competitors do that first. And then just looking, mobile gaming was a very big part of Nintendo. They've had their Game Boy for a long time and now the Switch, but they really don't touch or license out their IP very much for any cell phone games or anything like that outside of when they had a lot of success with Pokemon Go, right? So I think culturally Nintendo they're not wanting to adjust to this lack of control. They're going to maintain strong grasp on their brand to kind of protect it and not let it get diluted or anything like that.
You see that control too. There's a whole ecosystem in making games. There's a game called Mario Maker. Players can make their own levels, and there's like Twitch streamers and YouTube streamers that they'll like the player will make troll level that intentionally messes something up,
They glitched the game or something like that.
where like the level tricks the player in some way,
hmm
and then there are players who will go play that level and they'll play troll levels. Like that's all they do on Twitch and in YouTube, and they'll find these troll levels that have a glitch in it, and then Nintendo will delete them.
Isn't that how like Minecraft is built? In a
Maintaining
way, it's just
security
like
of the brand.
people building stuff, and Nintendo's like, nope.
Yeah, well,
You
they encourage it as long as you play within the sandbox. I guess as long as you color within the lines, they're
yeah.
okay with it. But when people find stuff that tricks the players in a way that Nintendo didn't authorize, those levels, it's like that guy in the Stalin picture.
This culture is like the corporate culture of Nintendo, very control oriented, very lockdown oriented, and it comes from a like there's this, like my grandparents are like this, right? Like people who grew up in the Depression era
Mhm.
will just like hoard food whenever they get the opportunity to. It's just like becomes part of your DNA. Is like you're just careful with money. You're just always worried about scarcity, even though like they haven't experienced that kind of scarcity ever since. But maybe that's what happens when you come out of like a crash of some sort, right? Like you just become very worried about like piracy and all these other things, right?
I'll also say very early in Nintendo's existence, they got hit with a big IP suit. Universal sued them over alleging that Donkey Kong was a ripoff of King Kong. And so I guess they very early on realized how important protecting their brand was. And they were actually so appreciative. They said it saved the company, and they named Kirby after their IP attorney. So Nintendo made like a bloated white thing full of hot air their, tribute to IP attorney. So we should all be thankful.
Man, I would have imagined it was Lynx, but
Don't
go
you feel so
figure.
lucky?
But yeah, so I who knows? Maybe that initial, getting exposed to another company enforcing their brand imposed on them the
Yeah,
importance of that. I don't know.
it's one thing to be worried about these things, but it's another thing to miss opportunities in the marketplace because of it, right? So like they actually saw the CD and the power of CD, but they just chose to stick with the cartridge, right? Because they were like, well, deterring piracy and asserting our control is more important than expanding the video game market, right? Because CDs offered a lot of improvements over the cartridges, right? Like you could like quadruple the amount of graphics storage, so that you could run more graphics intensive games on a CD based system than a cartridge based system. So yeah, yeah.
Music
So
too.
like you
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
open up new, gameplay possibilities. You can open up new storytelling mechanisms. You can have more immersive gameplay. All that stuff that comes with that improvement in technology, they just said, no, we're going to stick to this thing that we know. And maybe the thought process there was that, hey, our cartridge technology will come along, right? It will just keep growing and we'll be able to compete with CDs. I don't know if that was part of the thought process, but I know a big part of the thought process was, what about the lockout chips, right? People can just copy CDs. That's not that hard. And then where do we generate our revenue from? But the flip side is, what about the opportunity, right? Like PlayStation became a multi-billion dollar, maybe the most successful video game product of all time. And that could have been Nintendo, right? So that's the sliding doors alternative.
Hmm.
It's hard to criticize Nintendo because they're doing so well for who they are. Like part of me is like, could they have been Sony? Like, should have been Sony, right? Like they should be the most successful video game platform of all time. Like they could have potentially retained all the cool parts of being a Mario platform, plus all the cool parts of being like a Call of Duty platform or whatever it is, right? So I don't know. I think it's a missed opportunity, and their kind of culture has blinded them to this missed opportunity. Maybe.
Oh, I definitely did. I mean, look at all the developers that they lost during that transition too, right? It took a while for Squaresoft to come back to work with Nintendo again in the future. They quickly over to a place where they were made to feel welcome
Yeah.
in these
Yeah,
other
and the other,
environments. So,
maybe the last piece that I'll say here is that they, like a company that came out of a crash, they're so focused on profits and margin on literally everything that they do. So like PlayStation, Xbox famously will just, basically sell their units at margin for the first couple of years, right? And
mhm.
then because the chips get old every successive year, they make more margin on every unit sold as the years go by. But they just kind of do a big write off in the beginning and say, well, this is going to help us sell a bunch of games and so on and so forth, and then build our platform and our ecosystem. And then they can generate margin later, right? Through like all the software sales and things like that. So, like, for example, if you buy Madden for your PlayStation, Sony gets 30% of that sale price, right? So Sony's making up that margin in other ways through software sales. Nintendo doesn't do that. They're just like, everything we sell is going to have really healthy profit margins associated with it. There's no part of them that's like, oh, we'll forego some revenue today for an even bigger revenue tomorrow, right? Like they just don't do that. Like, yes, you could have missed out on some revenue and margin by having CD piracy, but you could have made that up so much by having such a bigger footprint, right? And that kind of thing. So even random things like controllers, accessories, they
Mhm.
make a profit on all of those things, where many companies will just like sell them at cost or something like that. Nintendo won't do that for any reason.
It sounds like they're very short-term focused on profit, but long-term
Yeah.
focused on control
Yes. Good way to put
as
it.
a company.
Yeah.
Example of a very short-term uh, profit leading, also showing a long-term control in the, if you remember when the NES and the SNES Classic Edition consoles came out. This was shortly after people were modifying their Raspberry Pis to be able to play hundreds, if not thousands, of video games. Nintendo looked at it and said, well, we can do that too, and just put it under our own brand. So they came out with a little box that looked like a Nintendo. You could plug it into your TV. Everybody wanted one. I remember people lining up in front of the different stores at this time. They sold out immediately. And looking at all these sales and realizing they didn't make enough, what do you think Nintendo does? They discontinue it after just a few months. They're just like, yeah, we did it. We're done. We're going to leave you wanting constantly for more Nintendo
They're
products.
the best Coke dealer on the block.
Yeah. Indeed. Oh my goodness. So I don't know. You look at it as a consumer and it's pretty frustrating to any of your like core fans, right? Like if you missed out on it because, hey, I want to give you money, Nintendo, and you're not letting me do it, you're going to be frustrated as a fan. And I would think it would damage the brand a little bit. Although some people look at it as, well, it's that idea of you can't have it. So it's very exclusive. Owning a Nintendo is kind of a special thing to have. So, and I feel like it went a little bit against their brand of being like friendly to the fans and friendly to families and things like that. So it was a little bit of an interesting choice, I thought, for this
Yeah,
item.
it is interesting. And I think that's like, I love that example because it tells you a lot about how the company thinks about their positioning in the marketplace and about its products. So like the other companies who would use a tactic like this would be like, is it LVMH, right? Like Louis Vuitton, they will put out a limited edition, purse or bag or whatever it is, and they will artificially limit supply, right? So that scarcity goes up and then prices go up, and people will spend tens of thousands of dollars on some of these things, right? And there's no reason Louis Vuitton can make 100,000 millions of these things, right? Like it costs them like $20 to make it. But the name of the game is scarcity, right? And that's how you make prices go up for things. If you are a kind of a niche or a luxury goods products, right? What the internet or electronics world, what makes it different than like a purse market is that like it operates on a totally different kind of scale and volume and marginal cost. Louis Vuitton, to make an additional handbag, it's like the marginal cost stay the same essentially, right, for them. Um, and they're not going to make up like the additional, like whatever loss of income they have from lowering the price of their bag. They would have to sell like millions of them to make up that lost revenue. It's kind of opposite for electronics companies, right? So like there is this function or a curve between quality and the number of units. And for like luxury goods, it's not like Louis Vuitton can like, by selling more, make the quality of their goods better, right? Like the quality of their goods remains same, but the marginal cost remains the same, but the pricing obviously fluctuates based on supply and demand. With electronics companies, the quality actually improves the more you make of something, and the marginal costs come down the more you make something as well, right? So think about the best cell phone. What is the best cell phone in the world right now? Apple,
Oh
right? Like it's
gosh,
the
what is
iPhone,
it?
right? Like or
Controversial
right.
hot take from Summer.
Don't want to hear about this. But also the best-selling cell phone in the world, right? They're kind of tightly correlated. Whereas in the past,
I'm gonna say Huawei. Whatever Huawei's making, that's the
Ooh,
best.
okay.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but the idea is that like you can bring a lot of innovation to the marketplace by selling more units, right? If like OLED screens cost a bunch, only way to like get get it to make it cheaper, right, is to sell a bunch of it, and whichever company can kind of
Mhm.
bring that customer base to bear can bring down the cost curve of any incremental technology, right? So like foldable phones are a great example of it, right? Like they are a better product in many ways, but they're so dang expensive, right? Those phones are $2,000, and not something, they're not going to be a mass market product. But whenever Apple brings a foldable phone to the marketplace, that phone's going to be $1,000, right? It's going to cost half as much as Huawei's foldable phones cost today. but it's going to be like twice the quality of a Huawei phone, just because Apple's will be able to do it at scale, right? And they're going to bring down the cost of the technology, and they're going to spend more money on R&D and quality control and all that stuff that a niche product just can't do. Whereas with a Louis Vuitton handbag, right, that it doesn't work that way. Like you're not gonna, you know, make a much better bag by selling more bags. Like you're gonna make a much better bag by selling fewer bags. Um, so that's just kind of my heuristic for like how I think about technology markets versus like niche and luxury good markets. Um, and you got to pick one. You got to be one or the other. And we certainly know where Apple stands. We certainly know where Sony stands. And where does Nintendo stand? Or Nintendo is trying to create this artificial scarcity. I don't even know why. It's not like they raise the prices of these things to exorbitant amounts. They just want to show
No.
that there's scarcity. They want to show that, hey, this is kind of a luxury good type of a market. Just remind people of that. Maybe it doesn't work that way in electronics, right? Like electronics, the more you sell, the better the product becomes and lower your marginal costs go.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that because I thought those classic editions were
Yeah,
pretty reasonably priced.
Oh yeah, yeah, they were very fair. Everybody, I'm sure once they hit the secondary
yeah.
market, when
Right.
people are
eBay.
reselling, yeah,
But
they
see,
became out
this
of
is the
control.
power
But
of Nintendo. We think it was reasonably priced, but it probably Nintendo when they priced it, they were like, "Oh my gosh, can't believe we're gonna get away with this pricing," because it cost them like $2 to make.
So
Yeah,
20-year-old games.
oh my goodness, yeah, they're not selling any copies of Super Mario
yeah,
Brothers anymore.
yeah,
You know, and all of a sudden they were able to monetize
yeah,
that.
yeah. So we're the suckers here.
I guess so. Well played, Nintendo. Um, but it's interesting too, because it feels very much like a thing that a fan would put together, right? Like, hey, I've made a box that plays all my old favorite Nintendo games, and like I said, Nintendo made it, destroyed it, uh, much to the distraught fans everywhere. Um, Nintendo also is just overall a very aggressive, a very protective company. We got to talk a little bit about what they get into with their IP and every type of IP. They'll go out and either write a cease and desist letter or provide some sort of lawsuit, whether it's a patent, a trademark, or a copyright, um, which is very different from what we see from their competitors. Microsoft very famously allows some fan made content on like Minecraft and things like that. Um, Valve, who owns Steam, has a whole section for modders to add things to games that they sell on Steam. They want to encourage it. They want their fans to participate in more ways with their games than just one controlled version. But no, Nintendo just will clamp down on this. So once again, maintaining control at this point, I'd say sacrificing consumer engagement as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. One of the other heuristics I have is that if you're a niche product, your biggest job is to generate consumer demand, because purchasers of niche products typically are pretty price insensitive. So, like, maybe
Mhm.
this is part of that strategy, or maybe this is just like the pet project of somebody who's like who loved old Nintendo games. Who knows? But like, if your job as a company is to generate consumer demand, then I think this is a pretty good job, right? Like, it could be argued that like having lines several blocks long to purchase an iPhone is like reducing consumer sentiment in some ways, right? Like making people frustrated about being able to purchase this thing. But in many ways, it's like a fan experience, right? Think fondly about standing in line to get the latest iPhone. Yeah, I don't know. And maybe there's some of that's happening with Nintendo as well.
I say longest I think I've stood in line is for the Lord of the
There
Rings
you go.
movies
And
when they
how
came
do you
out.
remember that time?
And
There you
I can
go.
think
Yeah.
back fondly to that. Yeah, it was good times. You ever stand in line, Pablo?
I stood in line for the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie. I remember that.
Good memories?
Yeah, because they gave us a little plushy Ninja Turtle, and I got Leonardo. That was my favorite. So
Oh, Leo's my favorite too. Nice.
See, there
pretty
you
good.
go. It worked.
Yeah. So yeah, we kind of touched on a little bit of their strategy, and it is very brand centric. And I know Bobby, you wanted to talk a little bit about Nintendo's brand as a whole.
Yeah, I
Here.
remember my trademark professor once said that Coca-Cola is so ingrained in our culture. It has a advantage that no one can touch because the image we have of Santa Claus is from a Coca-Cola ad. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a great story. And for me, Nintendo is that. I remember when I was a kid, my first mail that I would get was like Nintendo Powers.
Hmm.
You guys said either, PlayStation, Xbox, or and Switch, but we just have a Switch hooked up in my house. And and there's like when I was thinking back, I thought about a lot of things, but there's two stories in particular. I think you know really nail down how ingrained Nintendo is for me. My first memory involves
Wow.
Nintendo, actually.
Oh
Um,
wow.
I think you guys, yeah, yeah. I think you guys know that I'm a bastard. My parents separated when I was 2, and my brother was newborn or maybe even younger. And for 2 weeks a year, during the summer, we were forced to go stay with my dad. Everyone's on summer vacation, and we got to go where we don't know anyone and watch old Howdy Doody episodes and be forced to eat fish sticks and hot dogs. But like every year, one day he would take us to Showbiz Pizza, and that we loved it. We'd see the animatronic animals play and eat pizza. So we looked forward to that. And one time when we went there, and this is my first memory, I imagine they had arcades, but they they had one where it had a screen on top and you could see what was happening.
Mhm.
Like for someone, a little guy like me that couldn't see into the console, and it was making all this noise and it was colorful and people were controlling it and it was Donkey Kong, and I was like just transfixed on that screen. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I actually remember the next time I was like, oh, like the next summer, I was actually looking forward to going to my dad's house, and I was like, oh, we get to
The
go see the
Donkey Kong game.
the Donkey Kong machine.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's so cool.
And then another thing I remember, um when I first realized some people are playing a different game than us. Like I went to a boarding school, but it was a unique experience. It wasn't like a typical boarding school, and Coca-Cola paid partial or full scholarship for almost all the American kids that were there. And then you'd have these international kids that were super wealthy paying full freight. Um, so I went there from 8th grade to 12th grade. But I remember when I met the first American kid that was paying full freight, and he had like every shade of Tommy Hilfiger shirt in his closet. And I was like, oh wow, this guy's super rich. And but I didn't realize how rich. His name was Chad, fitting
Of
enough.
course it was.
His grandma came up from Atlanta, and this was when the Nintendo 64 first came out. So we all remember Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, thinking, Biggie, like, wow, what kind of wealth is it to afford both of them, both the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis? I'm about to hit you with something even a higher level. So Nintendo 64 first came out. I didn't know anyone that had it. I don't know what the real retail price at the time was, but it was whatever it was at the highest. Like
Mhm.
they may have had 8 games for it, Mario 64, whatever. So his grandma comes, they go to Walmart, they buy a TV that he's not allowed to have and a Nintendo 64 that he's not allowed to have in like every game. They come plug it up, and Chad wants to play with his roommate, but it only came with one controller. So they go back to Walmart. They don't have controllers. So they buy another Nintendo 64, take the controller out of the box and give the, gameless, controllerless Nintendo 64 to his roommate. And so from that point on, I was like, whoa, Nintendo 64, Nintendo 64. You might have money, but do you have two Nintendo 64 money? I don't know anyone else that did. So that's when I realized, whoa, some people,
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. So, I was trying to think, like, what's another brand that, to me has been, like, consistently good and just my whole life, and I don't know that there is another one. One other possibility is Lego, and I know
Hmm.
that Lego and Nintendo both have, like, theme parks and they both have animated movies, so I guess what I'm saying is if you wanna have a great brand, you need to make an animated movie and have Chris Pratt do the voice. So that's some advice for Chick-fil-A. I know know they're getting into content, so they need to make a full length feature with a have Chris Pratt voice the cow.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's true. I
Oh,
mean, yeah, I can't think of a better gaming brand than Lego, as a comparable to Nintendo.
Mm.
That's incredible, incredible. Yeah, it's they did a lot of things right, right? And I think this is why they have such an arrogant culture because the people would buy if you could afford it, two Nintendo 64.
yeah. Who could
My
afford it though? I
gosh,
can only
yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, branding certainly is very important. And actually, I was trying to teach my
Mhm.
kids about investing in stocks, and like this is a great proxy. Like my kids are very young, right? They're like 6 and 8. Um, but like even they understand what a valuable brand is. Anyhow, so like if you had given young us like some money to invest, we probably would have invested in Nintendo, and it would have been a great investment.
Definitely.
I'd say, yeah, this has been the most brand centric value company that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
So, and in a good way, that's always positive. You can always be like Comcast and you've got a brand value, but not necessarily a good one.
Yeah,
So, and this is what's unique about Nintendo, right? So, looking at it, you see this company that's got this super protective, kind of slow to adopt many things. Although they have to create some sort of excitement from their buyers. What do you focus on, Summer or Bobby?
yeah. Go ahead, Bobby.
I think their, edge is in their controllers, like Summer said, it's a social thing,
Hmm.
and I think of, like, party games and a lot of players, and they have the controllers that break out to where you can allow a lot of multiple player a lot of players to play with, like, 1 controller becomes 2 controllers, and
So anything to kind of create a more social uh, aspect, like the kind of hype that up around their console. You can play with more people.
Yeah, I think
correct.
like the one of the best case studies there is like the Wii, right? The Nintendo Wii was such a huge success, right? Because of the social element. Like I remember playing Wii like with my parents, my cousins, and my nephews. It was like everything.
Hmm.
And it was a very great social experience. But then Wii U that came right after it was a total flop, right? Like, yeah. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
there's some
that was
branding
bad.
mistakes there since we were talking about branding. Like, it was a totally new console, but it just seemed like it was version 2 of the Wii, which it was not. So poor branding choices there. One of the rare branding missteps by Nintendo. But also it didn't let like one of the reasons I think it failed so miserably is because they didn't leverage their content and they didn't leverage the social gaming part of this, right? So when the Wii U came out, I don't think it released any specific Mario games with it, or if they did, it was one or two. Um, so like it just didn't generate a lot of excitement from the buyers from the get-go. There's that confusing part of this. They had these controllers with like the screens inside of them, which although is
Mhm.
cool, it didn't make it more social, right? Like you guys said, being able to split your controllers and being able to share them, that kind of thing. It didn't work. So I think, and so Nintendo came out with the Switch right after that, which was a huge success, right? And I think the thing they learned pretty quickly, which to me is also a sign of a very healthy company culture, is that they released a bunch of Nintendo game content right alongside the Switch, right? So you could buy a Mario Kart, you can buy a Super Mario Deluxe or whatever like games are called. Mario Tennis, all that stuff. It
Mhm.
just came right alongside or with the Switch, so that made it much more palatable for buyers. And then they doubled down on the social aspects of it. So to me, that's a great case study to tell us what works and what doesn't work. So, we should focus on those things. And I think you guys identified all the right things, right? The social aspects, the user experience aspects, the portability, the controllers, all those things which make the Switch such a big hit, and certainly leveraging their IP. I would focus on those things if I was advising Nintendo's patent counsel.
There's even an accessibility part to it too, right? Everything still seems very straightforward and simple, I think, when compared to a lot of their competitors, right? It's set up, play, very quick, easy with the games, very
Yeah,
simple,
very
straightforward
simple. Yeah.
controllers. So, yeah. So we went and we looked at what Nintendo was actually patenting these days. Kind of looking back over the last 20 years or so, but recently, um, almost everything when classified by the patent office is focused on video game development. So this is the consoles, this is the controllers, and these are a little bit of developmental tools as well when you're going to come up with a new game. Very recently, which was interesting, they had some dealing with AI, like generating items for, I think it was Link in this example. Like, how does a game put together this cool item that does such and such and uses AI or leverages AI to accomplish that task? So that was one of the more interesting ones. And looking through it, there was a lot of focus as well on the actual design of these, the actual look of these devices. A lot fewer utility patents. We're looking at more things that are, how does the controller look? How does it feel? How does the console look? And things like that for Nintendo. So, which had kind of spurred on a further discussion that we can get into. But just looking at it, yeah, I'd say almost 70-80% is straightforward video game and how those things work, which I guess is expected, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get to this in a minute, but um, they're certainly doing things that I would expect a niche product company to be doing. Um, but you know, the larger question to me is, should Nintendo remain a niche product, right? Like, is this their fate forever? Like, certainly they locked in this fate
Hmm.
when they made the choice to stick with cartridges over CDs, right? Like when the PlayStation product was coming out, they just said, you know what, we are gonna not focus on immersive gameplay. We're not gonna focus on high quality graphics, 3D graphics. We're gonna focus on our core competencies and be very good at that, at delivering those core competencies, right? And it worked. But also it didn't work, right? Like they were relegated to third place in the marketplace. And
Hmm.
like the question is, should they be doing that again, right? Like we talked about it in the Xbox episode, right? That video game sales have stagnated, right? There's a lot of kind of
Hmm.
downsizing that's going to have to happen at the game developer levels, certainly at the console maker level, and so on and so forth. We've seen a 20-year bull market in the video game industry, and that market has softened in the last 4 or 5 years, certainly since COVID. And there is an opportunity to reshuffle the deck a little bit, right? And should Nintendo take advantage of this opportunity and kind of reposition themselves in the marketplace? Um, or should they just keep doing what they're doing? And if I was advising Nintendo, I would, certainly on the business level, I would be like, hey, why should we be the third place player in this space, right? Why can't we become the Sony for the next generation of video games? We already see Steam Deck coming, like Valve. They are doing very
Hmm.
interesting things from a market share perspective. I mean, they're allowing you to play AAA games on a handheld device, and that market I think is going to keep exploding. Um, and if Nintendo put a little bit more time and effort into their handheld console, Like, why couldn't you run a AAA game on a Switch too, right? If you can put powerful enough chips, if Steam Deck and Valve can do it on their handheld portables, why can't Nintendo do it? And why can't they offer a more performant gaming experience? We also talked about this in the Xbox episode that like gaming studios are moving away from exclusivity, right? So just because it's becoming easier to develop for different platforms, because you have these engines out there, so it's presumably easier to develop for the Switch than it ever has been, right? I mean, outside of the difficulty of working with Nintendo. So if I'm a AAA gaming company, I want to make my games available for sale on the PlayStation, on the Xbox system, and on the Switch. And why can't Nintendo leverage that and take advantage of that, right? Like right now, if you want to play a AAA game on a handheld device, you're gonna buy a Switch. You're gonna buy a Steam Deck. That's right.
Steam Deck, yeah.
Shouldn't you buy a Switch, right? That's the market opportunity that I see for Nintendo. Why aren't they picking that up?
Yeah, it feels like when Madden wasn't released on the Switch, they kind of gave up something. They kind of
Mhm.
you got if you're gonna be number one, you
That's
gotta
right.
have Madden. Or
Yeah, Call of
something.
Duty, right,
Yeah,
is like, yeah, that's right.
exactly.
Yeah, there's so many games like these that, like, if they were available on the Switch as a casual gamer, which all of us are, like, I think all of us own the Switch, right? Like, I don't own, like you, Bobby, don't own an Xbox or a PlayStation. We own a Switch. But if some of these games are available on the Switch, I would buy them, you know?
Same, same. I haven't been motivated enough to get a platform to get a Madden to get the new Madden, but I'll just keep playing Madden '04.
That's exactly it.
Mhm.
But if it was available, yeah, so Switch 2, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it should be more a stronger, more performant system, right? So perhaps they are moving this way,
Well, that's kind
but
of thing, right?
it's a
Yeah, like that's the
slow
thing
step.
is that like their portfolio, if they were moving in that direction, should look closer to the portfolio of like an Xbox or a PlayStation. Um, but it
Yeah.
doesn't, right? Like I would be focusing on the cooling and the thermal technologies, on graphics performance and 3D the content integration, 3D modeling, all sorts of stuff that we don't see in their patent
hmm
portfolio, right? Like if I was open and tuned into this possibility, I would be spending a lot more time on those things than on just kind of staying locked in with like controllers that magnetically attach to the game console. Right? Like that's
Yeah.
nice, but it's not,
Yeah.
you know, it's not going to open up new markets for you.
No, it is not. They're a niche company. And we mentioned this during the Xbox presentation as well, where they just file a fraction of what the Sony and Xbox do, but they're still very successful in their allowance rates overall, which is neat to see. And that partly, I think, was due to the fact that they are filing a lot more design patents as well. In general, a lot easier to find success in that area. Over a third of their patents are design patents, as opposed to actually making uh, better graphics or anything else. We like to see how our controllers look at Nintendo. Microsoft is about 20%. Sony keeps up also about 30%, and Valve, much smaller company, but they're moving towards it. They do about 15%, 16% of their patents. Now I don't know that an interesting observation, I guess, for their company. They seem to be focused on how they look more than what they
Yeah.
do.
Also, that's a great playbook out of a niche product category playbook, right? Like it's just like that's what a niche product should be doing. Is focused on the design, the look and feel, the user experience. So this all makes sense. And this is the hard part about criticizing Nintendo's patent portfolio mix. It's like they're doing all the right things for what they want to be, but the question is is this what they should be?
Yeah. You think we look back with fond nostalgia here to see what Nintendo could be back on top here, and just they're not looking for that. Maybe there's a little frustration there. We did mention earlier, Nintendo fairly litigious when compared to any of their competitors. 7 patents were involved in some sort of litigation, mostly cartridge design. There was one related to that Lockout-Chip, actually. They had to sue somebody for that. And they did have a design patent get litigated for the design of the GameCube controller back in the day. I mentioned that they also, if you remember the Game Genie back in the day, it was
Oh yeah.
add-on that you could give yourself infinite lives in Mario or make it so you ran super fast. Nintendo ended up losing that one. The Game Genie still was allowed to exist, but it's once again they're trying to protect the, I guess, purity of their brand there, their control over it. They famously went after ROM sites, which are somebody goes, they take an old game and they digitize it to make it so that you could share it on a computer and run through an emulator. They've been going after those sites constantly, which ironically, I did remember this, the NES Classic. They had to make essentially a series of ROMs to be able to create that device. One of them they found was from one of these ROM sites. Somebody had put a digital signature on it. And so Nintendo very famously kind of did what they were discouraging others from doing. I know it's a weird thing to do. Like, you're protecting a game that you're not making any sales on right now, right? And yeah, fan games come out, they'll issue cease and desist letters. Somebody made like knockoff Pokemon games or knockoff Metroid games, and they're no longer online. And modding groups as well. People were trying to mod the Switch so that it could play all these other games, and they cracked down pretty hard on that. So very litigious company.
Trying to be careful what I say. So the ROMs are not allowed, huh?
I believe it's kind of a gray area. You're
Uh-huh.
supposed to own the game if you have the ROM.
Okay, well there you go. I would not have been able to beat Final Fantasy, which I own, or Mega Man 2 without the ROM save state.
Yeah.
I guess this would be a good time to mention that the views of... No, I'm just kidding. Please don't sue us, Nintendo.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, they might come after us now.
Cut it. Edit that out.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is, again, a classic page out of the playbook of a fashion jewelry brand, right? It's like you got to be very litigious, got to be really on the lookout for counterfeit. It's actually like worth enforcing, like even brands that make $0 and properties that make $0. I mean, that's what Louis Vuitton does. So this all makes sense. And it's almost like Nintendo is being run by like a Louis Vuitton from just like a legal perspective than from an electronics company. So there is that brand tension again. It's like they just are operating in a different paradigm in a different world, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Well, for trademarks, you do have to
you do.
police your trademark, and
Oh yeah.
some of that stuff, even though Super Mario Brothers is 36 years old, that character
Yeah.
still very much alive, and imagine the same with
Yeah.
a lot of those
Yeah, that's
characters.
right. The trademark and copyrights, you definitely that's a totally different enforcement story. But yeah, it's like it's almost like this is maybe just me. More about me than Nintendo, I'm sure. But like anytime you are overly successful with something, to me that's also signals the start of your downfall, right? Like, so if you're over indexed on your like Mario properties and the characters, like those are hugely successful franchise and you should be protecting them for sure, but it can also allow you to miss the opportunity that's right in front of you, right? And like part of me feels like Nintendo's missing that opportunity. Hopefully they won't. Like maybe they will self-correct when the Switch 2 comes out. But I come from like a fan perspective, somebody who wants to see Nintendo do really well and expand its product offering and expand its positioning in the marketplace. And maybe some of that frustration is coming through here.
All right. Well, shall we put together some final thoughts here? Score up Nintendo. We all want Nintendo to succeed. We want to give them. Are you going to bias your grading too, Summer? No.
No, I don't want them to sue me, so they're gonna get all A's from me.
No. So let's start up here. Does it cover their base tech? Looking at it, they've carved out their niche, right? They protect exactly what they've staked out. They don't put a toe outside that line, pretty much, and they do a very good job building up the IP around that. So, I gave them an A for this. I thought that they did a good job for what they're focused on. I guess this whole thing, it feels like this struggle between what we wish that Nintendo was doing versus what they're doing. What they're doing or what they're focused on, they seem to do very well. But what we wish that they were doing, they maybe don't do so well as we go on through.
Yeah, I'll try to check my bias at the door here, but yeah, they have done a good job of executing on the strategy and the game plan that they have in the business and in the marketplace, right? So, yeah, that like what is really interesting about the Switch are the controllers, um, and the user experience and all that stuff, and they've done a good job of patenting and covering that as much as you can. So, yeah, I think they get an A there from me as well.
And it kind of follows through to the competitive differentiation as well. Bobby, what do you feel? Do you think they did a good job?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. That's same A for me.
Yeah, and it's same thing with competitive differentiation. They've kind of protected what makes Nintendo Nintendo. So, got an A there. But then we ask ourselves, how do they benchmark against their competitors? As we've seen in the past, Nintendo doesn't file as much. They are much more successful at it, and they don't necessarily file in the same areas as their competitors. So, with that in mind, what are
Same.
you
I
feeling,
mean,
Summer?
like they are a niche product company, so you can't file as many patents as the bigger players. So I think they've done really well. And as you outlined, Ian, they get almost all their patents allowed. So they tend to be pretty conservative or thoughtful in terms of how they file. Like we always say, especially with our smaller clients, it's like, hey, it's not the volume of patents, it's the strength of the patents and the quality of those patents. And I would say Nintendo certainly
True.
hits those marks as well.
You feel about that?
Same. Yeah, I guess I was looking on to the next one, and I think that we I guess for both of them, we kind of determined their biggest competitor is the Valve Steam Deck
Yeah.
for what they're trying to do, and I don't know that uh, are they able to exclude them? It doesn't look like.
No, no. So far, as far as we've seen, they can't in that mobile space there. They're not doing a very good job of excluding competitors from that area. They've definitely given up ground in an area that I think they've had a lot of success in the past. Game Boy's been a very popular mobile gaming uh, console for a long time, and then they kind of carried that over into the Switch and just kind of, I don't know. From my perspective, does Nintendo view the Switch as a home console or a portable one? Because if it was viewed as a portable one, I think they would be working harder to exclude like Valve from that.
Yeah, it might be kind of hard, right? To exclude Valve, but and also Nintendo doesn't see Valve as a competitor, right? Like it offers
Yeah.
you buy it for two completely different reasons, but that's a constraint that Nintendo has introduced, right? More so than Valve or the marketplace. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to grade them on this because, like, for what they consider to be their business segment, they have done a good job of excluding competitors. Like, I don't know if another tier two kind of handheld gaming console that's out there that's competitive with the Switch. Um, there's this other kind of upper tier market segment um, that they maybe Nintendo doesn't consider it to be theirs, but that's why they get a C. It's hard to gauge here. Right?
Yeah.
Who are their competitors? Like what we think of as their competitors is maybe not how Nintendo thinks of their own competitors.
I agree with that. So, does it align with forward-looking business plans and their R&D spend?
Same here.
And
Yeah,
this is once again, this is
yeah. I
the
mean,
conflict. What we wish and what
yeah.
they
Certainly, there will
view.
be some consolidation of some sort. or downsizing in this space.
Mhm.
Is Nintendo positioned to take advantage of that? No. Do they want to take advantage of it? No. So I don't know. Well, maybe the C is the middle grade here, but again, as you said, Ian, hard to say.
And then potential horizontal vertical integration. I think you kind of touched on it there somewhere. They kind of aren't trying to play in that sandbox right now. They've carved out their niche and they're happy with it. I guess for us, we'll still be able to buy a Nintendo in the future, but maybe it'll be harder to find people to play with because there won't be as many sold. Who knows?
Who knows? We'll find out. It's been an interesting, fun analysis journey, though. That's for sure. In Nintendo, it's very much its own thing, and they built their portfolio to be its own thing, which all makes sense to me, I guess.
Any final thoughts, Bobby?
I look forward to us all getting Nintendo Switch 2s and
Yeah.
challenging each other in Madden. How about
Excellent.
Let's go. I'll brush out my 2023 or 2003 playbook. It'll be great. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next episode. Well, bye.
Take care.